In the spring of 2019, 15-year-old Riley Crossman disappeared from Morgan County, West Virginia. Her friends and family were immediately concerned because Riley was far more responsible and less flighty than most teenagers. Even so, they hoped it was just a misunderstanding and that she would eventually resurface. But the case took a heartbreaking turn just 8 days later when her body was discovered in a trash bag alongside a local highway. And to make matters worse, the prime suspect was someone who should have cherished and protected her. And at the time, he was also in a relationship with Riley's mother. Before we begin, we would like to express our deepest condolences to Riley's friends and family members. Riley was born in Martinsburg, West Virginia on December 22, 2003. The quaint city of 20,000 residents is located in northeast West Virginia, just a short drive from Maryland, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. With a low cost of living, relatively little crime, and a refreshing small-town feel, Martinsburg is an ideal place to raise a family. Growing up, Riley doted on her younger sister Jade, and she was close to her older brothers, Ryder and Riker, as well. She had a relatively uneventful childhood, but she and her siblings took it hard when their parents divorced. They regularly visited their father in Martinsburg after the separation, but they all lived with their mother, Chantel, in Berkeley Springs, about 25 miles or 40 kilometers away. And eventually, Chantel's boyfriend, Andy McCulley, moved in with them as well. Friends and family members described her as caring, reliable, creative, and stubborn, but she was also more innocent and naive than many girls her age. Riley had lots of friends and an active social life, and she was also a star student. By 2018, Riley was a happy young woman with a bright future, and things got even better when she met her future boyfriend, Hayden Lacey. She and Hayden hit it off immediately. They eventually met each other's parents and went to 2 school dances together at Berkeley Springs High School, and when they were apart, they spent tons of time chatting, texting, and talking on FaceTime. For the residents of Berkeley Springs, Tuesday, May the 7th of 2019 started out like most other days. The weather was warm, summer just around the corner, and Riley had a normal day at school. Her mother, Chantel, was asleep on the sofa when she got home just after 3 p.m. She hadn't been feeling well, and Riley also knew she was worn out from working 2 jobs. She didn't want to disturb her mom, but she eventually woke her up so she wouldn't be late for her work that night. After Chantel left, Riley spent most of the evening with her brothers, her grandmother Debbie, and Andy McCauley. She went to her room to FaceTime with Hayden after her grandmother left around 7:30 p.m., but they got into an argument almost immediately. Hayden was going on a school trip to Washington, D.C. the following day, and Riley didn't want him getting too friendly with any of his other classmates. He eventually fell asleep around 10 p.m., but Riley sent him a disturbing message at 11:01 p.m. "Andy's in my room. Shh. Don't say anything about it so he can hear everything." Then, 12 minutes later, she sent a second and final message. "I'm scared, babe." Riley's bedroom door was closed when Chantel went to check on her after work that night. She assumed her daughter was sleeping or texting with Hayden and decided not to bother her. We may never know what happened between 11:01 p.m. that night and the following morning. But when Hayden woke up at 5 a.m. on Wednesday the 8th, he immediately saw that he had missed a FaceTime call from Riley the night before. When Chantel went to check on Riley a few hours later, around 7:15 a.m., she wasn't in her room or anywhere else in the house. She didn't usually leave for school that early, but that morning Chantel wasn't surprised that she was already gone. She knew about Hayden's class trip, and she figured that Riley had walked to school early so she could see him before he and his classmates left. Nothing in Riley's bedroom looked out of place, but Chantel noticed that she hadn't taken her purse, glasses, or phone charger with her. This was a little odd because she never left home without them, but it wasn't necessarily cause for concern. That day, everyone went about their business as usual. At that point, all they thought was that they would see Riley around 3 or 3:30 in the afternoon like they always did. But her grandmother got worried when she didn't show up after school. Chantel tried to contact Riley multiple times, but her calls went to voicemail and texts went unanswered. This was a red flag because, like most teenagers, Riley was never far from her phone. In addition, she had always responded to calls and texts within a few minutes, and she always let her mother or grandmother know in advance if she was planning on being home late. Then Chantel realized that she hadn't actually seen Riley the previous night. She went to her bedroom to check on her sometime after 10 p.m. but didn't actually go in because the door was closed and she respected her daughter's privacy. Andy began acting strange when Chantel told him that Riley was missing, but he said he would go look for her. Chantel drove to Berkeley Springs High School, which was just a few blocks away, but she was horrified when she found that Riley had never shown up for school that day. When she got back home a few minutes later, Andy left on his bicycle to go look for Riley, and she and her friend Kelly set off to do the same. Later, when she came back home, Andy was asleep on the couch instead of out looking for her missing daughter. Now Chantel was angry, flustered, and distraught. Her keen mother's instinct told her that something horrible had happened, but she figured if anyone knew where Riley was, it would be her boyfriend, Hayden. But he told her that he had not talked to her, texted, or seen Riley at all that day. When she hung up with Hayden, Chantel was in panic mode. She immediately called 911 and reported her daughter missing. Sometimes the police will react slowly when teenagers go missing. After all, they often disappear intentionally and maybe show up a day or two later, no worse for wear. But according to Riley's father, Lance, and everyone who knew her, this would have been way out of character for her. She was just too thoughtful to keep her friends and family worried unnecessarily, and at just 15 years old, she was not old enough to drive. At that point, nobody knew where she was or what had happened, but the only reasonable explanations were that she had been in some kind of accident, or worse, was taken against her will. Officers began searching around Riley's school and home, questioning her family members to see if they could provide any additional information. They also talked to her friends, and to their surprise, at least one of them told them that she may not have come home because she was afraid of Andy McCauley. Investigators already knew Andy was an addict with a long rap sheet that included drug, burglary, and assault charges dating back nearly a decade. Needless to say, he was a person of interest from the very beginning.
Oh, sorry, buddy. They're going to bring the dog up to sniff around and see if they can get a trail for her. But I wouldn't mind talking to you for a minute if you got a minute. Yep. When's the last time you saw her?
Like 9, maybe 10-ish.
At night?
Yeah.
And what context was that?
She was here in the house with me. Well, grandma was here till like 7.
Okay.
I think it was 7:30. She left.
Okay.
Kids were here out with me.
Right.
She was at work till 10, I think it was. She got home.
Okay.
9:30, 10 o'clock. She got home.
Okay. And what time she go to bed?
Me?
No, the girl.
She went to bed probably. Well, I don't know what time she went to bed, but she was. All the kids were in the room by like 9:30.
Okay.
No, the kids actually were here. Me, Ryder's here. Riker was here. I was there.
Okay.
And she was upstairs.
She went upstairs. That's the last you saw her. Did you see her leave in the morning?
No, I left at 4. I got up 4 o'clock in the morning. Left at 5.
Okay.
Go to work.
Where are you working at now?
Howard and Martinburg doing construction.
Okay.
Andy seemed helpful and cooperative when officers showed up at the home to ask him some routine questions. Meanwhile, scores of concerned residents searched around the area for Riley. Because kidnappers often take their victims across state lines, the Morgan County Sheriff's Office immediately notified law enforcement agencies in Maryland and Virginia. Federal agencies like the FBI, the ATF, and the Department of Homeland Security were also called in because they had far more resources and experience in dealing with perplexing missing persons cases. When officers showed Chantel the texts that Riley had sent to Hayden the night before, she said that Andy may have gone into her room to sexually assault her. However, it's not clear why she said this or if he had made advances towards her daughter in the past. Either way, Andy was questioned again multiple times at the home in the early phase of the investigation. He was even shown the text messages Riley had sent to Hayden that night before being reported missing.
Argument here last night,
No.
or I mean the night before, anything, any reason she would leave?
No.
Okay, because the rumor going around, people telling us that she was afraid to come home. I don't know if that's, I mean, you know how people go sometimes. But
No, nothing like that.
Okay, so,
She wouldn't have to be her. I mean, they're
Right.
they ain't like that. It's never like that.
he says nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah,
Her mom wasn't even home.
right.
She was at work.
No, you. They said that she got an argument
No,
with you and,
no.
and didn't want to come home.
No.
So, I don't know.
She was her you can ask her grandma. She was here doing dishes and everything. Her grandma was here till 7:30.
Okay,
Debbie.
right.
Yeah. It was everything was cool.
Anything that,
Can help us.
yeah, can help
Yeah.
us.
I mean, if I had something to help you, I'd be doing it, brother. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So we're waiting on her to get back now so we can go do this stuff
Okay.
for her and everything.
Sometimes it's part of our process.
Yeah.
When somebody comes missing like this, to ask everybody to take a polygraph
Oh, yeah,
just to make sure.
definitely.
You're good with that?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Problem. You know what I mean?
We just have to bring somebody in. So.
Yeah. It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything.
All right, good.
Anything else?
Andy volunteered to take a polygraph test, and since he was not under arrest, he went to the station voluntarily. But the results were inconclusive because he was under the influence of drugs at the time. Later, he was questioned by officers and investigators from the Morgan County Sheriff's Office and the West Virginia State Police. He told them that he had been asleep on the night of May the 7th until early the following morning. But phone records show that he had texted a friend nearly a dozen times around 2:30 a.m. on the morning of May the 8th. Andy eventually admitted that he left home on foot to buy drugs because he was going into withdrawal and felt horrible.
At 2:30 in the morning, I don't know what to say. Yeah.
I don't drive. She won't let me drive. I don't drive nothing. I don't want to drive her car at all. She mad at you? She's not mad at me. She's mad at me for getting high. She's like, we wouldn't have been out at 2:30 in the morning, and we wouldn't have to be going through these steps. And now when you come back, I'm going to search for her right now. And I'm stuck in here for about 2 hours. Then she'll be out there looking for her. You know what I mean?
When did you get to work that morning?
4 o'clock.
He also said that he got up around 4 a.m. and left for work about an hour later. At the time, he was a construction worker for a local company. Andy told investigators that he was at a job site in the Red Hill subdivision all day on May the 8th, but the company's owner told a different story. He claimed that Andy asked for 3 heavy-duty trash bags and said he needed to leave and clean up another job site. When Andy returned 4 or 5 hours later, his boss noticed that his shoes were untied, his clothes were disheveled as if he may have gotten dressed in a hurry. Investigators also had CCTV footage of Andy leaving the job site in his green truck and traveling along multiple roads. However, some of the roads were not between the job site in the Red Hill subdivision and the other he claimed to have visited. One of the roads was the Tuscarora Pike, where Andy initially denied being on that day. But when he was confronted with the contradictory video evidence, he grudgingly admitted that he had been caught in yet another lie. And once again, he claimed that he didn't tell the truth because he went to buy drugs and didn't want to incriminate himself. Andy was a drug addict, but this just didn't add up. One of his co-workers told investigators that he already had cocaine on him that day and that he wouldn't have needed to go buy more. Investigators now knew that Andy spent 4 or 5 hours doing something other than buying drugs, and it almost certainly had something to do with Riley's disappearance. Morgan County Sheriff Corporal Luke Shambaugh said that Andy had lied about nearly everything and had changed his story multiple times. To a person, the officers and investigators agreed that he was involved in Riley's disappearance somehow. Now they just needed to prove it, and if it wasn't too late, find Riley. Later, when her saliva and DNA were found on a pillow in her bedroom, they feared she might already be dead. As the days dragged by with no sign of Riley, even her most positive friends and family members began losing hope. Then, 8 days after she went missing, their worst fears were confirmed. On Saturday, May the 16th, 2019, a body was discovered in heavy-duty black trash bags located along the embankment of Tuscarora Pike, about 25 miles or 40 kilometers southeast of her home in Berkeley Springs. However, identification was not possible because the body was in such an advanced state of decomposition. Nonetheless, it was definitely a young woman or a teenage girl. Whoever it was, the victim's t-shirt was bunched up around her neck and shoulders. She was also wearing denim shorts that were torn, unbuttoned, and partially unzipped, but her underwear was pulled abnormally high around her hips and waist like someone else may have put them on. There was also an unidentified chalky white substance on the victim's shoes, and investigators found a number of screws scattered around the site. They were sure it was Riley. But they couldn't break the bad news to the parents until the body had been positively identified, but they did tell Andy McCauley. By then, he was already the main person of interest, and they wanted to gauge his reaction when he got the news. When they did tell him about the body that was found near Tuscarora Pike, he became noticeably flustered and asked if they knew who it was. Officers said that it hadn't been positively identified and they hadn't notified Riley's parents. He replied that he hoped it wasn't Riley, that she was his daughter, and that he loved her like one of his own. The following day, the body was sent to the office of the chief medical examiner in Charleston, West Virginia, where dental records did finally prove that it was Riley Crossman. Advanced decomposition had prevented the medical examiner from determining an exact cause of death, but it was ruled a homicide. Investigators also learned that the white substance on Riley's shoe was commercial drywall mud, and Andy could not explain why drywall screws like the ones discovered near her body were also in his truck and tool belt. With a mountain of evidence against Andy McCauley, investigators concluded that he went into Riley's room on May the 7th, came up behind her while she was lying face down on the bed, and strangled her or smothered her with a pillow. They also suspected that the motive was sexual. The medical examiner didn't find any evidence to support that theory, but Riley's mother told them that he may have entered the room to sexually assault her. She also told them that Andy could be sexually aggressive when he was under the influence of drugs. Police arrested Andy on May the 16th of 2019 and charged him with Riley's murder. Morgan County had always had its fair share of crime, but according to prosecutor Dan James, the tight-knit community had never seen anything like this. Andy's trial began on September the 27th of 2021, more than 2 years after he allegedly murdered Riley. Present in the packed and emotionally charged courtroom were Circuit Court Judge Deborah McLaughlin, Riley's parents, friends, and relatives, members of the press, law enforcement officials from local, state, and federal agencies, Prosecutor James, the jury, and the defendant, Andy McCauley, and his attorney, Andrew Arnold. Everyone knew that the state had a rock-solid case against Andy, so it came as a big surprise when he pleaded not guilty. In similar cases, defense attorneys often urge their clients to plead guilty and place themselves at the mercy of the court. Or, alternately, sometimes they will negotiate reduced charges in exchange for a guilty plea and a speedy trial. State Prosecutor Dan James began by presenting an overview of the horrific crime and how it played out from beginning to end. In a particularly poignant moment, he rhetorically asked why Riley's shorts and underwear were ripped. It was never proven that Riley was sexually assaulted, but this reminded the jury of the heinous nature of the crime. When Riley's mom took the stand, she provided a sober and nearly emotionless account of the circumstances surrounding her daughter's disappearance. Then, Dr. Piotr Kubajek from the Office of the Medical Examiner testified about the state of Riley's body and the autopsy results.
So, upon review of all the available studies, the autopsy findings, autopsy toxicology, review of some law enforcement information, I arrived with the cause of death as a homicide due to unspecified means in setting of decomposition, because decomposition, of course, makes impossible to really.
Dr. Kubitschek testified that Riley's shorts were unzipped, unbuttoned, and that her underwear was partially torn.
They were unzipped,
Were they also unbuttoned?
unbuttoned and unzipped.
Okay. And do you remember if Riley Crossman's body at that time had shoes on?
There was one shoe on.
And do you remember if there was anything specific about those shoes? Well, strike that. Do you know if the shoe was tied or untied?
If I recall, it was untied.
And do you recall anything about a adherent white chalk-like material located on the shoe?
Yes, there was some.
West Virginia State Police Sergeant Sean Wolf noted that her shorts and underwear were hiked up much farther than normal and that a portion of her genitals were exposed.
Next, direct your attention to the victim's clothing. Do you recall what she was wearing?
I do. At the time that we were present, there was a shirt. It was bunched up around the neck area here. Later, when they took it off and hung it up to dry, as I recall, it was like a Native American or tribal pattern type shirt. She had on small blue jean shorts that were unbuttoned, and there was a zip. The zipper was kind of a unique. It was like a ring type zipper. The button had like a little A. I don't know if that's Abercrombie or what, but it was the design pattern. The shorts were kind of torn a little bit in the back, but the shorts themselves were like small type shorts, blue jean type denim shorts, and then the underwear on the child victim was red, like a larger type band, and it was. I noticed that we noted, and we discussed this with the doctor, that they were both pulled high. They were unusually pulled high. They didn't look. I don't know how to describe that. Just when you put on your clothes, or when you put, on your own clothes, you pull your
Hiked up?
your height. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how to say that, but these looked hiked up, like even if maybe somebody pulled them on quickly, or maybe something had been pulled on, but they were hiked. That's something that Sergeant Wojtek and I discussed, was just the fact that they didn't look comfortable the way they were put on. They were pulled too high. I don't know how to. I don't know how they.
Do you recall if the victim's vaginal area was partially exposed?
It was because the underpants were pulled into that area, so to say. I'm trying. So yes.
He also said that strangulation and suffocation could not be ruled out, even though the medical examiner was unable to determine how she died. That statement was ultimately stricken from the record because he was not qualified to make such a determination. But even so, it painted a vivid and horrifying picture for the jurors and those present in the courtroom. Later, forensic analysis described how the drywall mud and screws found with Riley's body matched those found in Andy's truck and tool belt. Another witness who provided damning testimony against Andy was his old boss, Howard Ruark. He told the court that Andy had asked for heavy-duty trash bags on May the 8th, left the job site for 4 or 5 hours, and that his shoes were untied and his clothes were disheveled when he returned.
If Andy was coming back to the job site.
Did she respond back to you?
Yes, she said she hadn't even knew that he had left.
Okay. Did you have any other communication with Chantel?
I don't believe so, no.
And was this communication before lunch or after lunch?
This was after.
It was after lunch?
Yes,
Okay. And did eventually Andy come back to the job site?
he did.
And do you remember what time he came back to the job site?
No, I'm not sure exactly what time it was.
How much longer after lunch do you believe it was?
Probably an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Okay. Do you recall, was he driving a vehicle when he came back?
Yeah,
Did you
my green Dodge.
Did you actually see him physically driving that vehicle?
Yes, he pulled up in it.
What do you remember about Andy? Did you see Andy get out of the vehicle?
I did.
What do you remember about Andy getting out of the vehicle?
He got out of the truck. I noticed his shoes were untied, and he was kind of fixing his clothes. Walked up to me and said, "My bad, dog. I'll work late if I need to." And I said, "It's all good. I was just happy to have the truck back."
Did you ask him where the heck have you been for the last 4 to 5 hours?
I did not.
During the week-long trial, prosecutors presented more than 120 pieces of evidence, including the footage of Andy traveling the Tuscarora Pike on May the 8th in the vicinity where Riley's body was found. During closing arguments, Prosecutor James stressed that the crime was premeditated. He also reminded the jury how long it took for someone to die from suffocation or strangulation, and that during that time the killer would have had ample time to relent. As the trial drew to a close, jurors were instructed that they would have the option of attaching mercy to Andy's sentence if they found him guilty of first-degree murder.
At this point in time, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you have reached a verdict of murder in the first degree. A murder in the first degree is without mercy. If no mercy is attached, requires me to sentence the defendant to prison without being eligible for parole. A finding that mercy attaches to the verdict, or a finding of mercy, means that they will be eligible for parole in 15 years. However, there's no guarantee that they'll get paroled in 15 years. So if after 15 years of actual time served at some date on or after 15 years, they may, at the wisdom of the Board of Parole, be released into the community. The other hard edge around that mercy determination is it's like a verdict of guilty must be a unanimous verdict. In other words, you must all agree that mercy attaches or not. There is no burden of proof associated with this. You get to simply hear each side's position regarding the issue of mercy.
This meant that if mercy was attached, Andy could be eligible for parole in 15 years. But before the jury left the courtroom to consider mercy, Riley's father, Lance, took the stand.
Thank you, Dan. Members of the jury, thank you for hearing me. How do you summarize your child's life? How do I explain what she meant to us? I can't. Riley was the type of child you hope to have one day. She was kind and gentle and loving and full of life. Riley will be forever frozen in time, only living on in our memories now. She will forever be 15 years old to us. Counsel mentioned 15 years. In 15 years, he may be eligible for parole. She only got 15 years. That's all she had. 15. So if this is a case of mercy, like Mr. James said, where was the mercy in this crime? Where was it? Where was the mercy when he walked into her room where she's supposed to feel safe? Where's the mercy when he attacked her? Where's the mercy when he put her in a trash bag and dumped her off the side of the road like garbage?
Andy's defense attorneys took great pains explaining that attaching mercy wasn't a guarantee that his client would be paroled in 15 years. Instead, it only meant that a parole board could review his case in 15 years.
So I want you to be clear that an attachment of the word mercy is not an award of parole, not by any means. In asking you to attach mercy to this verdict, we do not ask you to award parole after 15 years, 18 years, 21 years. The parole board will consider somebody facing a life sentence after 15, but if they do not grant parole, they will only reconsider in 3-year increments. We do not, in fact, ask you to award parole at all. What we ask is that you leave that really important question to a distant future, to another body, the parole board, whose obligation is to community safety first, to fair and just retribution, and to the orderly management and operations of our prison systems.
Afterward, the jury took less than 20 minutes to convict Andy McCauley of first-degree murder, death of a child by a custodian by child abuse, and concealing a body.
We, the members of the Pettit jury, as to the issues joined, find the defendant, Andrew J. McCauley Jr., as follows. Count 1, murder. Guilty of murder in the first degree.
And, unsurprisingly, they voted unanimously not to attach mercy to the verdict. As such, Judge McLaughlin gave Andy life without the possibility of parole on November the 4th of 2021. Andy remained stoic and refused to make a statement after the sentence was read. At the end of the trial, Riley's mother, Chantel, Prosecutor James, and a number of officers and investigators who had worked the case all expressed their disappointment that the death penalty was not an option under West Virginia law. Andy McCauley is currently serving his sentence at the Mount Olive Correctional Complex in South Central West Virginia.